And
Yes.
we get caught into this trap that the solution to things is to think positively. I think that's absolute garbage. And I actually think if you study emotional intelligence, it tells us that that has been debunked. I think don't be a positive thinker, be a thinker.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Brain Cage podcast. This is Shantanu and we are here because we sense the urgency of healing, growth and change. Our goal with this podcast is to bring you tools and inspiration so we together can create a flourishing world both inwardly and outwardly for ourselves and generations to come. We are back with your weekly dose of mental health, and today we have with us an educator and a men's mental health activist, Norman Still. He believes that there is a pandemic of depression and anxiety going on among men and is here to share his wisdom with all of us. So without further ado, let's get into it. Hello sir, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Shan. Good to see you.
Let's start this one on a bit lighter note. You were earlier you were telling me about your fascination with India, right?
Yes.
So what specifically fascinates you about Indian tradition, Indian culture?
Well, to be honest, I mean, I grew up playing a lot of cricket, and I have through that I made a lot of Indian friends. I had many Indian friends growing up, and I still do. And being from England, of course, my favorite food is Indian food.
Okay.
And I think, a little bit of the history of India has been fascinating to me. As part of my life as an educator, back when I was a history teacher, we used to teach the Ramayana and things like this, and some of the origins of Hinduism. So, yeah, it's a country that's always had some fascination to me. Unfortunately, I haven't had an opportunity to visit there yet, but I'm sure that day will come.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you when you are planning to come India.
Well, it's difficult to travel anywhere with this COVID situation.
Oh, wow. Yes.
But once COVID's lifted, the world will become a little more easy to navigate. So there's a few countries I would like to see, India being one of them. Yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of COVID, talk to me about your concept of the mask.
Well, the mask. I mean, this is why I recorded the little video, the little poetry recital I did around the mask, because
Yeah, I highly recommend people check that out. It's your channel's name is Norman Still, and what's the name of the video?
It's called the Rooftop Ramblings, I think I called it. The
So
poem
people
is
who,
actually
so
called.
people who want to listen to it can search on YouTube Normal Still Rooftop Ramblings, right?
I can share the link to you as well, actually. Shan.
Yeah, I'll put it on
So,
the description of this video.
yeah, but I think it's been I don't like if it's the physical mask we have, which is what everybody's wearing at the moment. I don't like it. I find it very difficult to really understand what someone's expression is, whether they're laughing or whether they're sad or what's really going on behind the mask. But I think beyond that is the more philosophical, psychological idea that, we hide behind masks anyway, even if they're not physical masks, that they are perhaps emotional masks or behaviors or attitudes and dispositions that we display because we don't want people to see who we really are. And I think that's where I was trying to draw that parallel, with the physical COVID mask that everyone unfortunately has to wear, and also this deeper idea that human beings they're afraid of being, I think we're often afraid of being authentic, because we fear that if people know who we really are or what we are really thinking, that we will be judged and we will be rejected and we will be laughed at and scorned at. So yeah, that's why I found that particular, the poem is actually called Please Hear What I'm Not Saying.
Okay.
And I think that's, that was my inspiration for it, was because I frankly am one of these people. I know we have to wear masks for COVID, but I don't like it. I find them uncomfortable, and it's a very an unreal situation for me. So
Yeah. It's kind of, we are scared of
right,
being
so
vulnerable,
just be on the table.
right?
Yes, we absolutely are, Shan. And I mean, over my life, I've developed a deep, through personal experience, a deep interest in mental health.
Yeah.
Particularly men's mental health, because I think it's. I'm not saying there is more importance of men's mental health over women's mental health, whatever. It's just simply that I think men's mental health is not something we speak about enough, and I think it is something that I think a lot of men are essentially almost in an emotional prison, because they don't feel that they can show their vulnerability, because we live, or I think many of us have grown up in societies and cultures where we're taught that men don't cry, big boys don't cry,
Yeah.
in
Don't
England
be
we
a
have
pussy.
sayings like yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I'm
We
saying in England
we
have
hear
this thing
that
of,
all the time in movies,
Yeah.
in our songs.
yeah, and in the UK we have phrases like putting on a brave face and a stiff upper lip, and
Yeah.
I certainly am someone who I don't believe that's I don't think it's a healthy approach. Now that's not to say that we have to conduct ourselves with sort of an element of self-control to make the world go round. We can't just be walking the streets in floods of tears every day, screaming our emotions at everyone.
Yeah.
But I think we should try and break down those barriers as men and talk more openly with each other about what's really, really going on. We live in a world with very, very high male suicide rates. There's got to be a reason for that, and that's why the older I've got, and through my own experiences with depression, with anxiety, and so on, I certainly have taken great strength and fortitude and value in being able to open up to people and just being my vulnerable self, and to say, well,
That's so brave.
who I am. It doesn't make me right, but to be brave enough and authentic enough to actually say, this is my human condition. This is who I am. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm thinking. Why hide? Here's the question. Why as men do we hide? Why are we afraid to show, if you like, our emotional side, to show our real heart and our soul? Why do we, believe we've got to be macho and we've got to behave in a sort of with that herd mentality? To be a bloke means you've got to be like that. Well, no, it doesn't, because ultimately we're just still vulnerable, deeply flawed, emotional human beings.
Yeah. So let's go a little bit deeper. These phrases like men don't cry, you need to man up, or don't be a pussy. So from where do you think these kind of phrases stems from? Like, what's the root
I think this is
cause? Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a good question, Shan. I would suggest that most of it's embedded in culture, in historical cultures, probably. If we go right back through the development of mankind, if you like, and the origins of mankind and how gatherer times, when the men were out and sort of going to kill an animal to feed the family, and that the male, the identity of the male was a very, very it was very well defined. It was almost predetermined that to be a man you had certain duties and certain roles. Now, that's not to say that in this day and age that there is a I think there are still differences between the roles of males and females in society. But
Absolutely.
the world is a far more complex place. The world is a far more complicated place to live. A man these days isn't just tasked with the responsibility of lighting a fire and going out and killing an animal for dinner.
Yes.
We are now involved with our families. We're involved in complicated lifestyles with mortgages and with having to raise enough money, not just alone with our wives. I mean, marriages are very complicated. It's an expensive world to live in. The emotional pressures, the media, the advertising, what the marketing people tell us we should be like, the social media, the internet. We're now exposed to far, far more dimensions and complex identities and ideas than we were 10,000 years ago as hunter-gatherers. And this has, of course, put far, far more pressure on men and women.
Yes.
But I still think among men there exists this very sort of historic identity, is that man up, or as you say, don't be a pussy, grow up, be strong. Well, unfortunately, it's a very different world we're living in, and mental health is real, and mental health problems are real. The science tells us this, the academic research tells us this, doctors tell us this, psychiatrists, psychologists, and so on.
Yeah.
But we still don't get it. We're still too afraid to be our authentic, vulnerable selves.
So what I understand is you are saying the world has changed, but
Yes.
we are living with the same paradigm which we were living when we were like hunter-gatherers.
I think that's where look, I think there are multiple reasons for this, but I think that, through just through biology, I think men were probably pre-programmed to have this, more combative, independent sort of, I am a man, I'm the breadwinner for the family. And I think some of those things probably still linger through our DNA and our genetics, if you like. But the problem is, it's a very different world, and I think, but that's not the only driver. I think there are drivers from what the media tell us we should be, what the marketing people tell us we should be, and societies are very different. You could be part of a society where maybe it's a little easier to be expressed and vulnerable as a man, but you could equally be in a society where men just don't cry, and to cry is weak, and to show your mental weakness or to show the weakness of your soul, your emotions, is just the wrong thing to do, and it just brings about scorn and rejection. And I think that's why there's an awful lot of men who deep down, when you peel away all those layers and take away the masks, they're very, very lonely, isolated individuals.
What I think, we should express and feel whatever life offers, because when you choose to feel only good emotions and you try to suppress the bad ones, what you are doing is actually you're not living your life to the fullest. We always listen this phrase that live your life to the fullest, but
Yes.
but it also, we talk it about in a positive note, positive tone.
Yes. Yes.
But what it means is to live your life to the fullest is to experience whatever life has to offer. and not suppresses, because by suppressing it, yeah.
No,
Yes.
I agree, Shan. It's one of the things that I don't like. If you go into, a reasonable bookshop somewhere in one of the big cities, going to Waterstones in London or somewhere, go to the self-help section and see things like the power of positive thinking. And,
Yes.
we get caught into this trap that the solution to things is to think positively. I think that's absolute garbage. And I actually think if you study emotional intelligence, it tells us that has been debunked. I think don't be a positive thinker, be a thinker.
Exactly.
Whether your thinking is negative or positive, that's your reality, and kind of embrace it and accept it and try and deal with it and address it. But the idea, for me, in the times when I've gone through, what I would call fairly deep episodes of depression in my life and anxiety, the worst thing someone can tell me is cheer up,
Yes.
smile, just
Can
think
relate.
positively and it'll be okay. That to me is the last thing I want to hear, and I can't deal with that. I don't have a switch between positive and negative.
Yeah.
I just I'm awake or I'm asleep, and I think it's just a preposterous idea that positive thinking
It's just thinking, right?
somehow. Yeah, I just think they were just thinking. Yeah,
There is no positive, there is no negative thinking. It's just your when you it's your emotional involvement with your thoughts which make it whatever you wanna call it, positive or
Yes.
negative. It's
Yes.
thinking is just thinking. There's nothing
And
positive. There's nothing
you-
negative about it.
yeah, yeah. And who's the judge of whether something's positive or negative anyway? I mean,
Exactly.
if I go out this morning or tomorrow morning and say I feel really, really miserable, and everyone says to me, "Well, why don't you be more positive?" Well, maybe miserable is being positive for me. I don't, who's maybe I'm all right being miserable. I mean, I think it's a very complex area, and that's why
Yeah.
I particularly enjoy looking at more emotional intelligence now, because emotional intelligence is certainly looking at some of these areas around, where I think are the debunked theories of the 1980s, 1990s self-help, it was all positive thinking, negative thinking, and I just, I have no time for that stuff anymore.
Yeah. What I think is we should not run away from negative thoughts. Rather than we should try to understand what negative thoughts are, and
Yeah.
try to let the negativity, and whatever the feeling is, whether it's happiness and whether it's so-called negative feelings, let them pass through you. Don't get
Yeah.
stuck into the negative. No, don't get stuck into the positive, because they
Yeah.
are just like emotions, and it's just like clouds passing in the sky. They'll come
Yeah,
and
it's-
go. You have to just be
You're
present and experience them fully.
You're absolutely right. It's very interesting. I have a very good doctor out here in Cambodia who I sort of go to for therapy quite frequently. And although he's a Western trained doctor, he's very much qualified in Western medicine,
Yeah.
he is equally, because he's from this region of the world, he also has that more Eastern holistic mindset to medicine. And he talks to me a lot of very similar ideas to what you're talking about there, is that just these thoughts, they're transient, just let them go, but kind of just go with them, accept them when they're there, and when they're gone, but try not to get too fixated on them.
Yeah.
And I think we've got in the Western world, or certainly where I come from, to use that phrase, the Western world, well, like the UK, Europe, and so on.
Yeah, I understand.
I think we don't pay enough attention to mental health, and I think we've commercialized it through just this positive thinking, negative thinking. Go on a seminar with some motivational speaker who's going to change your mind in a
Yeah.
day. Well, this is garbage, right?
Absolutely.
Because anxiety, depression, sadness, misery, melancholy, these are real things. They're not something that some bloke can deliver a 2-hour seminar and cure. So it's something that I think we as men globally, we need to start exploring our mental health more.
Yeah.
I wish I had done this years ago, but it's probably only in the last 2 or 3 years that I've really started to take it very, very seriously and research it more and talk about it more as well. So
Yeah. I think the phrase men should not cry or men don't cry is like bullshit, and men should cry more often, and they should express their feelings to people, to their friends and to their loved ones more often. And there is nothing wrong in crying, and there is no weakness, and the only weakness there is that you running away from your feelings, you running away from the actuality of the situation. That's the only weakness I think there is.
Absolutely. And I think also even in relationships and marriages and partnerships, I think it's, when I think if we learn to communicate more openly, more authentically, to speak more truly of what's really going on inside of us, I think we would see a great strengthening of relationships around the world, because it's a very common thing to see, people just close up and they don't talk anymore, they don't communicate. And I would posit that it's a complete breakdown of communication that kills half the relationships, that exist on this planet. We've got to start as a species, we've got to start talking to each other. Think of all the people, right? Think of all the people, even today in this world, who have taken their own lives. There will be thousands, tens of thousands of people today will have committed suicide for sure, across the world. Did they have a need or a chance or an opportunity for one last conversation that would have made them change their mind? How many of us know someone who has taken their own life, and so I just wish I'd had a chance to have a chat. I wish I knew what was going on in that person's mind. I didn't know. Well, maybe this is the time. Maybe now is a wake up to the world that let's start talking to each other in an authentic way, not this parade of masks, which is the poem I read about. It's that phrase, please hear what I'm not saying, because most of us just talk utter crap to each other. We go to work, we pass each other in the corridor. Good morning, how are you? Yeah, I'm good, thanks. You? When deep down you want to say, I feel like absolute crap, and I'm miserable, and I'm feeling depressed, and I want to sit down and have a coffee and talk to someone. But we don't do it. We just pretend. We say, oh no, I'm good, I'm fine.
Yes. As you were talking earlier, there is like this Western concept of just going to those motivational seminars and all that. And there is like huge emphasis on mindset. And there is huge emphasis on speaking, become a good speaker, have a like excellent mindset. But I think rather than being a good speaker, obviously you should be a fairly good speaker. But rather than being a good speaker, it's better and it's more important to be a good listener, because most of the problems I think occur from not listening to people rather than speaking your own thoughts. Because when we are talking to someone, we are just interested in saying what we have to say, and when the other person is talking, we are thinking like what we have to say next. So what are your thoughts on that?
You're absolutely right. You're right, Shan. Listening is something that we don't do, and we've got this thing, hearing without listening or listening without hearing. I've in my lifetime, I've been to 2 or 3 of these motivational type seminars. I won't name names, but pretty famous people. And they cover, we've had opportunities to meet them sort of afterwards, backstage or whatever.
Yeah.
They say never meet your heroes. And it's true, because ultimately I found all of them to be highly disappointing. They were just brilliant motivational speakers, but you go and try and stop them for 30 seconds at the end of the conference, they haven't got the time for you. They're actually just making their money from pseudoscience. I would be far more interested if I really want to know what I need to do to sort my mind out, my depression, my anxiety. I would rather sit down with a neuroscientist or a psychiatrist, actually, work out what's the chemical issues going on in my brain. Why are my neural pathways misfiring? Someone who scientifically knows what's going on in the mind. I think there's just too many of these. I don't know. I almost think like a snake oil salesman. And there's so many books. The Power of Positive Thinking. You can, if you think you can, feel the fear and do it anyway. I mean, millions of people read these books, but never become successful. It doesn't change them. It might change them for 5 minutes, and then of course everything goes back to normal. Because I think deep down what most of us lack and desire for beyond all this are some of the most very fundamental needs of the human condition, which is a sense of community. To be loved and to love, to feel a sense of worth, to have a purpose, to feel a sense of, that we have a value in society, and to have people around who will listen to us, and also to listen to others. And I don't think those communities need to be big. You see, here's another thing, Shan, excuse me, we're talking about people not listening. I'm talking a lot right now, but I'll shut up in a minute.
No, but
we live in this global world now. 8 billion people, probably 50% of them access to the internet. Now people are getting all their social interaction through, Facebook and Instagram and whatever else is going on out there. But it's this huge community of billions of people. But biologically, we're designed to live in smaller communities. This is a reality. I mean, I think Jonathan Haidt writes about this in some books. And some of the evolutionary biologists write about this as well, that, we're designed really to live in communities of not more than about 150 people.
Yes.
And of course, we're trying to live in communities of billions with this global sort of village concept with the internet and Facebook and so on. And then we wonder why we get lonely, because we've got 8 million contacts, but we haven't got a single friend.
Yeah. And how many fights and how many political debates or even fights in relationships do we see? And do we see people say, "Oh, I hate him because he listens too much."
Never happens. Yeah,
it never happens.
Exactly.
So,
but no, I agree with you. Listening is really very, very, very important.
Yes. So, what are your personal experience with mental health, and what mental health tools you have discovered in this journey which have helped you the most?
So I'm diagnosed with something now which is called a generalized or general anxiety disorder, which is my brain is, I'm just very anxious a lot of the time about a lot of things. And I also live with depression. I'll be authentic. I take medication for depression. I take sertraline hydrochloride, which is just a very mild SSRI, which is a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, which just kind of tries to level out the serotonin levels in my head. But for a number of years, I go through very dark, morbid, gloomy times. I won't go too much into that because it will take too much time. But it's had a big impact on my life, my relationships, my family. It's led me down wrong paths into, becoming dependent on, drinking too much alcohol or smoking cigarettes, whatever. Very stupid solutions to a problem that is much deeper than being solved just that way. And all these fixes, anything addiction wise, is just temporary. So you feel manically depressed and gloomy, so you get drunk, but of course the next day you feel 10 times as gloomy because a hangover makes it a lot worse. It's just a cycle that it just goes on, and it becomes a vortex. You go down and down and down. So I'm at a phase of my life at the moment where I'm trying to look at some different techniques to deal with my own mental health. A number of those, I see a doctor here for therapy for about half an hour every week, which is really just a chat, but very useful. Looking at some breathing techniques, looking at doing a bit more sport, looking at focusing a bit more on my family, looking a bit more at going for walks and enjoying nature, and actually embracing some of the more simple things in life. And slowing down, realizing that Rome wasn't built in a day. If I've got a major deadline at work or something that's high pressure, if I don't meet it, such is life. It's not the end of the world. It's not life or death. I'm not a brain surgeon. I'm not out there sort of saving someone's life. A lot of this stuff we panic about can wait. So going a little bit more slowly, trying a little bit of meditation. I'm almost just trying a lot of different things at the moment. But the most important thing is doing things like this, Shan, and trying to get involved in some of these mental health communities, which is where we first connected.
Yes.
And then starting my YouTube channel where I want to do some kind of poetry recitals and things like that. Just little things that might cheer someone up. If I can make one person in the world feel better on any given day, then maybe that's a good result.
Yeah. We often focus on big things like I'll be happy when I'll get a Ferrari, or I'll be happy when I'll get rich. But as you pointed out, the real happiness which we actually get it's from little things, like making someone laugh or gifting someone something. Speaking of gifts,
please.
Speaking of gifts, what are some books which you have gifted a lot?
Books that I've read and love.
Yeah, read and loved and recommend, which you will recommend.
Recommend it. I've got a very diverse kind of taste in literature. I will tell you right now, I will never ever give somebody a Harry Potter book. I actually hate Harry Potter, so don't worry about that.
Same here.
One of my favorite authors is a guy, Hermann Hesse from Germany. He wrote books like Siddhartha. He wrote Wanderings. He wrote Knoll and things like this. I find because a lot of what he wrote about was quite self-reflected in a way, even though it was presented through stories and so on. So I would be a big advocate of Hermann Hesse. I like to read sort of fairly general poetry. The kind of the commercialization of books like, a lot of the Alchemist and things have gone for me. They were a fad. I don't really like those sort of things anymore. But, I can take books that have touched me personally and I've, found them to be truly beautiful. The Kite Runner, Jonathan Livingston Seagull. I've just read many books in my life. The Prophet, Kahlil Gibran, I really enjoy that too. I've got a number of go-to books. I will read sometimes elements of the Christian Bible. I think there's great wisdom in there. Not as a particularly religious person, but I think there's great
story.
Yeah, and morals and allegories and metaphor and tales of the worth living. And also who wrote it? The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, I think was a brilliant kind kind of book, a Brazilian author. He wrote about, 4 agreements we make with the universe, and things like, don't take things personally, because nothing that anyone does or says to you is because of you. It's just a reflection of their own self. Always do your best, because on any given day your best will be different, because you're not always at the same capacity every day.
Yes.
But I like The 4 Agreements is a book I would recommend. I kind of quite like The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle. I think there's something in that book. It's not all brilliant, but I think there is some great value in acting in the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's a good question, because I really have read a vast number of books. I mean, some of it will be more, novel drama stuff that I just enjoy for entertainment. But there's also a lot of books. Another book I would recommend that I liked was the I can't remember what it's called now. It'll come to me in a minute. I'll remind you. It's a beautiful book. I haven't read it for a long time, but what was it called? The Spirit, the Cloud of Unknowing.
Okay.
Cloud of Unknowing. Just remember that. Have a look at it. It's a very, very interesting book.
They are all. I think they're all great recommendation, and I have personally read Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha and Eckhart Tolle's Power of Now, and I will definitely check out whatever you have mentioned. And I highly recommend people check out who are interested in like improving their mental well-being. So
yeah, but I also read. I think I read a lot now. I quite like Jordan Peterson, The 12 Rules of Life. I will find myself watching quite a lot of. I enjoy watching a lot of debate on YouTube. I enjoy, reading academics like
Jordan Peterson is a psychiatrist or psychologist.
Psychologist, yeah, from Canada. Has very, not everybody loves him, but that's okay. People are entitled to their opinion. But I think he's an extraordinary human being who talks a lot about men and being vulnerable and being authentic and real and so on. There's something very beautiful in what Jordan Peterson talks about. People like Jonathan Haidt, also another Canadian academic. So I find myself these days, especially working in education, a lot of what I read will actually tend to be academic papers and research papers that may be related to themes within education that I find fascinating, because I think education surely is a field that we can use as a platform to create a world that is more beautiful and creates more flourishing human beings, to use the phrase that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah. So before you go, what will be your message to the world?
So my message to the world is I'm a 51-year-old man, Shan, living over here in Cambodia with a wife and a 3.5-year-old daughter, and life isn't easy, and we've got to fight. We've got to work hard to get our income, and life can be a struggle. Life can be really, really tough. But my message to the world is, it doesn't matter how tough it is. Don't give up. But that's a bit of a flaky phrase, don't give up. Sometimes we do want to give up, right?
Yes.
Find people to talk to. And I'd also say be kind, even to strangers, not just to your friends. Just look out for people. If you see someone's mood has changed a bit, someone's just not smiling the way they used to, or just keep an eye on the people around you and probe away at them with questions and make sure they're okay. Compassion, kindness,
yes,
unconditional love, and forgive people. just because somebody does you wrong, or somebody offends you, someone says something you didn't like, don't hold that in your heart against them forever, because the very nature of the human condition is that we screw up again and again and again. Every one of us. No one is any different. So what gives us this arrogance to suggest we can't forgive people? No, we forgive people. So I think more than anything, I would say be kind and be mindful and be watchful of what's going on around you, because you never know. Just a short conversation, even with a stranger, might save someone's life.
Exactly.
And a message for men: start talking to each other. And if you're depressed, talk about it. And if you're anxious, talk about it, because there's nothing wrong with it. Depression is a medical condition, just like having, you're not afraid to tell people you've got the flu. You're not afraid to tell people you got COVID. You're not afraid to tell people you got a broken leg or diabetes. Why are you afraid to say you've got depression? Let's get over the stigma of this and start talking.
What will you say to the women who are listening to this? How can they help men in this journey? Because
I would say to women listening to this, look, we focus this on more men's mental health because it's partly, I feel it's an area of life that's just really not addressed enough. But I don't think there's anything I've said here that doesn't apply to women either. And I would say that, we live in a world where at the moment, men are often vilified, for, not treating women properly in some parts of the world, and people are saying it's a very macho world, it's a patriarchal society and so on. But I would say to women, you'd be surprised that beneath these masks that men tend to wear, you'll find a lot of very gentle, tender, caring, loving souls who just want someone to listen to them. So I think my message to men and women would talk to each other, but talk authentically, talk about stuff that matters, talk about matters of the heart, and we might be surprised that we can really repair some of these broken bridges that we see in the world today.
That's so powerful. And thanks for coming. I really enjoyed talking to you.
It's been great to talk to you, Shan.
Yeah, and pay me a visit sometime again.
I know, let's keep communicating, let's keep the dialogue, you've got a movement, you're starting a movement here, keep this movement going. Been an absolute pleasure, Shan. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Same, I had a really good time.
I found it quite empowering and encouraging that someone young like yourself is actually reaching out and doing something about this very serious issue in the world, which is mental health and the well-being of the human mind. It's a noble cause. Keep at it.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your blessings.